Alrighty, what's up, guys? We are in some random town in southern Brazil, and I was just going for a walk. And one thing I do often when I'm trying to think about things is I'll keep an audio journal. Like, I'll just record thoughts that I have on the audio app on my phone, and I find it to be a very clarifying activity whenever thinking about things, planning things, to just sort of speak it, just kind of put words to the ideas or the thoughts. I find to be sometimes quite clarifying. But one thing that I'm thinking about a lot, like I said, I'm in this random town here in southern Brazil. I don't know if you could even really call it a town. I'm in the landscape of southern Brazil. And one thing I'm thinking a lot is I'm planning for the next month, thinking about things I want to do. And I think finding a spot, train jiu-jitsu, get into some surfing. And it's part of the reason why I like kind of traveling a little bit slow, or trying to slow travel more, is because when you're constantly sort of fast traveling, there's always this sort of energy, this caloric expense, almost brain power that's put into constantly figuring out all these little micro habits that you take for granted when you're just sort of living your day by day, a normal life. Where am I going to eat? Where am I going to sleep? Where am I going to go to the gym? How am I going to get my social activity? How am I going to kind of check all these boxes? And of course, there's no place that's perfect. Every place kind of is better in some areas and worse, and there's varying levels of convenience. In some ways it's liberating, in some ways it's freeing to just sort of be traveling in sort of a rapid pace, because I do think that extra brain power that is required when you're constantly coming up with new habits day by day, it does make you feel like life is longer. It makes time pass by slower. Whereas when you're slow traveling and your brain doesn't have to work as hard and figure out, okay, where am I going to get this? Where am I going to get that? Oh, this is cool. Where am I going to get this? Where am I going to get that? It naturally just kind of like shuts down. And, there's the extreme of that where it's like, you're working the same job, living in the same place, 40 years, blah, blah, blah. Life passes you by really quickly. And I think that's what people crave so much about travel, is they crave that ability to, sort of feel like life is slowed down a little bit. But of course it goes too far to the extreme where it just takes energy, So I'm thinking about this next month, and it's energy. It's like, it's time that I'm spending thinking about it. It's like, do I go to this place? Do I go to that place? Well, this place, I can go to Floripa, which is like a bigger town, and that would be better for XY reasons. There's more stuff to do, there's more social, more girls, there's more jiu-jitsu options. Or it could just be in a place more like this. And it's like, well, how long do I want to do that for? And I think one thing I notice is that I can sometimes do too much is thinking about planning and stuff like that, where a lot of times I'll try to think about, okay, where am I going to be 6 months from now? And oftentimes, I'm nowhere near that. I'm in a completely different place. And so you can sort of break things down to whatever extent you want and almost become sort of obsessive about it, be kind of a compulsory planner in a way. And recently I'm reading Notes from the Underground by Dostoevsky, and I really love the way Dostoevsky writes, and I love how he really pinpoints a lot of aspects of psychology that I think a lot of other writers don't really do. It's a lot of the uncomfortable bits that I think most aren't willing to necessarily kind of touch on. And he had one quote in that book I really recommend it. It's a real kind of piercing read, where he said, man will desire the absurd, the chaos, and he will desire and do things that even lead to his own destruction, his own cannibalism, all for the sake of showing that he can, and that he won't be ruled and he won't be played like some sort of piano key. And and of course, I come from a culture of the West, where the reasoning faculty has sort of taken predominance over any of our other faculties, almost to like a tyrannical degree. And I think what Dostoevsky's kind of saying in that quote is, he's saying, there's more to man than just that faculty. There's part of yourself even that won't allow it to be ruled just because you say this or that makes sense. And you have to kind of take in the totality. And then if you only rely on your reason and function, and that's the thing about travel, is there's so many spontaneous things that comes up that's why I think so many people, particularly from the West, who comes from these cultures where, granted, I think that the West is the best culture. I think that European white civilization is the most, superior culture that exists. But at the same time, it is a fact that this reasoning function has taken so much of ownership over ourselves and, like I said, kind of tyranny over our lives, that I think that's why so many people come down to Latin America and they find it to be a relief. That's why I like Latin America, because there's a spontaneity down here that borders on, doesn't border on it, it runs right past the definition of impulsivity. And when you see it with the people down here, I think that's what a lot of people, when they come down here, that's what they like, that's what they find. They're like, oh, the people are so nice, oh, it's such a refreshing place. I think in a lot of ways it is a bit of a reprieve from that faculty in some ways. And I think Dostoevsky really pinpoints it, where you can't play yourself like a piano key. Life is like a living being that you sort of have to have a dialectic with, that you're having a conversation with, that's throwing things at you. No matter how much you sit down and you think, this is going to go this way or that's going to go that way, things take a different direction. That's something that's very apparent while traveling, where let things go and sort of open up. That's where the really cool things start happening. That's where you meet interesting people, you meet interesting friends, you meet interesting girls, you meet people sort of at the right point in your life that's sort of like teaching you something. And all that's to say is that all that's to say is that like life, the idea that I was having is like life in and of itself, of course, is like a dialectic. It's like this thing, it's a living thing that you have to deal with, that you have a conversation with, where you'll have experiences and novelties that'll sort of just come up and are really beyond your control, just like dealing with another person. You can't control the way another person is gonna think and feel and behave and change. And these blocks of time that you're dealing with, like when I'm sitting down and I'm thinking about a month, the blocks of time themselves are kind of like a living thing. Like the month that I have before me is something that I'm, something that you're kind of contending with. It's like, okay, well, this month was good. This month was, so-and-so, like, oh yeah, back in March, there's a certain hue that sort of colors that period of time. And it's colored by the things that life threw at you at that time and the way you reacted to it. And so often I find that when I sit down and I try to plan, I'm going to go to this place, I'm going to go to this city for this long, and I'm going to do it because it makes sense. I think one thing I said earlier was like, not every place is perfect. When you're thinking about things like, well, this place is good for the social factor, this place is good for, there's like all these little different kind of video game stats that every place has. Medellin is really good on the women, but it's kind of really bad on a lot of other things. This place is really good right now for nature, but obviously it's not great for, it's not really high in sort of the social side of things. And so you can kind of sit down and compare places and measure up their different qualities and their video game stats and think like, how can I find the right balance of this and that at the right time? And it just becomes a question you just can't answer. It becomes just this sort of knot that just gets tied tighter and tighter, and sometimes you just gotta accept that there's not going to be a perfect place, and you got to just deal with this place where, okay, it might be a little bit low on this, it might be low on the nature, but I got to take advantage. We're like going down a steep hill here in the Brazilian forest, but it's about to get really pretty, I promise. But right here, that's nice. This is cool. See, that was worth it, all that in there. So that's me just sort of thinking for a little bit. I hope you enjoy my video. Let me know your thoughts. What's your approach to things? Thank you. Peace.